I didn't even know his name that morning. Just a man in a cheap suit, standing at the edge of my fence like he owned the sky behind him. Clipboard in hand. Tie crooked like he got dressed in a rush. "Final notice," he barked. 7 days to vacate. HOA board's orders. I was barefoot, coffee in hand, still shaking off the sleep when he said it. The audacity hit harder than the caffeine ever could. And right behind him, 2 more. One of them was Karen Whitmore, our self-declared queen bee of Hidden Pines. She stood there with those oversized sunglasses she always wore like armor, even when it rained, lips curled in a smug little smile like she'd already won. That's when I realized they didn't know. They had no clue who they were standing in front of. No idea whose land they were stepping on. I looked at them, didn't flinch, didn't raise my voice. Just took another sip of coffee and asked, "What exactly am I being evicted from?" He rattled off violations like he was reading from scripture. Fencing, barn paint, too many animals, unauthorized solar panels. My God, not the solar panels. Then came Karen's voice, sweet like spoiled milk. "Oh, we expanded last month," she said. "You're in the HOA now, sweetheart." And that's when something clicked deep inside me, the same way a rifle bolt locks into place. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was calculation. Strategy. You see, I'm not some backwoods cowboy they could strong-arm. My name is Mark Dalton. I'm a retired U.S. Army logistics officer. I've seen towns fall, empires collapse, leaders cry. I've spent 20 years in sand and smoke just to come back here and finally breathe. I earned this land. I built this ranch from scratch after I retired. 45 acres of peace just outside a bloated Arizona suburb. No HOA. No politics. No fences unless I damn well built them myself. I bought it with my own hands, signed title deeds with a pen that still smelled like gun oil. The barn, the solar panels, the horses, the trails. It wasn't just a retirement plan. It was my sanctuary. And I picked this land for a reason. No HOA jurisdiction. No shared roads. I owned every inch of dirt under my boots and more. But they didn't see that. They saw a man alone. No wife. No kids. No neighborhood barbecue RSVP. They saw easy prey. That's the mistake people like Karen always make. They confuse silence with weakness. They mistake kindness for surrender. And they never see the storm until it's right over their heads. Let me tell you something, neighbor. Especially if you're reading this from your porch, cup of black coffee in hand, looking out over land you've tilled and toiled. There's a kind of peace that only men like us understand. The kind that comes after years of fighting other people's wars, of seeing too much and talking too little. And when that peace gets threatened, not by fire or storm, but by arrogance and designer sunglasses, it wakes up a part of you that's been sleeping for a long time. A part that remembers how to stand your ground. I didn't argue that day. Didn't show them the title deed I kept in the fireproof safe, signed and notarized. I didn't mention that the land their beloved HOA building sat on, their headquarters, their little castle, wasn't even theirs. It was mine. Bought it years ago for future horse trails, way before they ever poured concrete. Their title company made a mistake. Built their clubhouse on land they didn't own. My land. I'd kept quiet, let them host their meetings, send out newsletters, print glossy welcome packets for new homeowners. All on my dime without knowing it. I'd even chuckled sometimes when their lawn sprinklers hit my fence. But the second they tried to evict me from my own home, that's when it stopped being amusing. That's when I knew this was war. Not the kind fought with bullets, but the kind fought with truth. And patience. And damn good documentation. The kind of war where every receipt, every drone shot, every GPS point mattered. That morning, as they walked away, clipboard man scribbling nonsense and Karen flipping her hair like she just made a point, I stood there and smiled. Not because I liked being harassed, but because they'd made their first and final mistake. They thought this was just about fences. They had no idea they were poking a bear who'd spent 2 decades learning how to pick his battles and win them. You want to know how this really started? Not with them. It started with me, and a promise I made the day I moved out here, to never let the world steal my peace again. I found this place after my last deployment. Desert storm-colored skies. Wide fields. No sirens at night. The only thing louder than the wind was the sound of horses breathing. I built my house with a local crew, kept it modest, nothing flashy. Red barn out back. Vegetable patch. Solar panels to keep the lights on even when the grid gave out. I taught kids from the local school how to ride on weekends. Donated eggs and squash to the food bank. I wasn't trying to be a saint. Just wanted to be left alone. But peace makes some people nervous, especially people like Karen. She didn't like what she couldn't control, and nothing about me fit into her spreadsheet of suburban order. My truck was too loud. My fences too rustic. My barn too red. And the worst part, I didn't need her approval. The HOA was born the moment the developers rolled in. You know the type, white trucks, men with sunglasses and blueprints, measuring dreams in square footage. They bought the land around mine and stamped out Hidden Pines estates like a plastic mold. Lawn signs, LED-lit sidewalks, robotic mowers. Then came the rules. They didn't apply to me at first, of course. My property wasn't in their plat. I had my own road, my own gate. But like any good infection, they spread. First came the letters, politely aggressive, coded in faux concern. They asked me to change my fencing, to reconsider the livestock, to remove my solar panels. For community harmony, they said. What they meant was, fit in or get out. I ignored the letters. That didn't sit well. Karen started coming by in person. Once I caught her taking photos of my horses. Another time, she stood at my mailbox for 20 minutes, pretending to be on a call. When I confronted her, she smiled and said, "We just want the neighborhood to be safe." Safe from what? From freedom? From someone living without their permission? She even left a note once, typed and laminated, that said, "You'd be surprised what a bulldozer can fix." That was when I installed the cameras. Not cheap ones. High-end. Motion-activated. Night vision. Synced to my phone. Then one day, I caught her inside my fence line, making a video of my barn and calling it a safety hazard. That crossed a line. I filed a cease and desist through my lawyer, a sharp ex-jag named Evelyn, who could quote land use codes in her sleep. The HOA responded by doubling down. Said I was hostile. Said I was uncooperative. Said I was threatening the fabric of the community. And then came the eviction notice. Hand-delivered. Full of legal nonsense and empty threats. They thought that would break me. But what they didn't understand, and maybe you do if you've ever had to fight for your home, is that men like us, we don't run. We hold. We fortify. We wait. I didn't reply to the notice. I just walked back inside, poured another cup of coffee, and opened the safe. Took out the title deed, the survey maps, the receipts. Held them in my hands like old medals from battles long gone. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was about principle. About dignity. About showing people like Karen that some lines you don't cross. That some land isn't for sale. That when you mess with a man's home, you better know whose land you're standing on. And they didn't. Not yet. But they would. They would soon. And by then it would be too late. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was afraid. They hadn't earned that. It was something else. A quiet agitation in my bones, like when you know a storm is coming, even before the skies shift. I sat out on the porch, boots on, watching the moon rise over the hills. Brutus, my old shepherd, lay by my side, ears twitching every time the wind stirred the trees. I didn't talk much to him, but he always listened better than most people. I kept thinking, what kind of person looks at another man's land and thinks, mine now? By morning I had a plan. See, one thing about serving 20 years in Army logistics, you learn to read systems. You learn how power flows, who really pulls the strings, and how to quietly, surgically cut through the mess. Hidden Pines HOA wasn't just annoying. They were arrogant, and arrogance leaves trails. Paper ones, digital ones. All I needed was to find the loose thread and tug. I started with the County Land Records office. The young guy behind the counter had that look, half bored, half curious about why a dusty rancher in a worn flannel shirt was standing there with a file folder thick enough to stop a bullet. I handed him the parcel numbers and smiled. "Just checking some boundaries," I said. He nodded and pulled the documents. I already knew what I'd find. I just wanted it in black and white, stamped with the state seal. There it was. Parcel hashtag 38-117 be mine. Fully mine. And right across it, shaded in gray, the HOA clubhouse, parking lot, and their so-called community garden. I took photos, made copies, and had the clerk notarize them. I even asked him, casual like, what happens if someone builds on land they don't own? He raised an eyebrow. Usually a lawsuit, he said, or a forced relocation. I smiled. Good to know. Back at the ranch, I didn't go straight into attack mode. That's not how you win these fights. You let the other side keep walking deeper into the trap they don't know exists. Let them get comfortable. That's when they make mistakes. And boy, did they. The next week, they escalated. I got a second notice. thicker than the first. Printed on embossed letterhead with the Hidden Pines HOA crest at the top, an acorn and some oak leaves, like they were running a presidential office and not just telling people what color mulch to use. This one accused me of willful noncompliance, violation of aesthetic integrity, and get this, contributing to community disharmony. I nearly choked on my coffee when I read that. Disharmony? I hadn't set foot in their neighborhood. I didn't attend their wine tastings or book clubs, or whatever else they did behind those perfectly trimmed hedges. My barn wasn't even visible from their streets. But you see, it wasn't about visibility. It was about control. Karen and her little court couldn't stand that someone nearby was living free. I could have ignored the letter again, but I knew it was time to start building my counterstrike. First, I called Evelyn, my lawyer, my friend, and one of the smartest women I know. She didn't say much after I read the letter to her. Just one word: idiots. Then she said, time to go public. We drafted a packet. Simple. Clean. Containing deed copies, boundary maps, and a summary of what had happened so far. We sent it certified to every HOA board member. Not as a threat, yet. More like a whisper in the dark. A polite reminder that they were trespassing on land they didn't own and barking up the wrong tree. The next day, Karen showed up again. This time, she wasn't alone. She brought 2 HOA officers and what looked like a private security guy. Black polo shirt, sunglasses, earbud like he was protecting the president. They stood just outside my gate, trying to act official. I didn't go out. I just watched through the camera feed. Karen was pacing, talking with her hands. The guard looked uncomfortable, probably realizing he was standing on shaky legal ground. Then they did something stupid. They started photographing my house. The truck. Even Brutus, who had wandered into frame. That crossed a line for me. You don't photograph a man's home like it's a crime scene unless you're ready for war. I opened the gate. Walked out slow. Calm. No yelling. Morning, I said. Need help with something? Karen flipped her sunglasses up. Her eyes were tired but burning. You're in continued violation, Mr. Dalton, she said. We've decided to pursue formal action. I nodded. That's so. She nodded back. Expect a legal filing. We're within our rights. I stepped forward, handed her a copy of the county land records. Then you might want to check whose land your building is on before you go spending more money on lawyers. She read it. Her face didn't change, credit where it's due, but her hands gripped the paper a little too tight. This doesn't change anything, she muttered. I smiled. It changes everything. And it did. The next week was quiet. Too quiet. No more letters. No visitors. No weird SUVs parked outside the gate. I thought maybe, just maybe, they were regrouping. Maybe someone had talked some sense into them. I even let my guard down a little. Started fixing the old fence post by the southern trail. Brutus roamed freely again. The chickens went back to their routine. It almost felt like normal. Then someone cut my power line. Not from the utility side. From the barn. Clean cut. Intentional. Same night, a flare was tossed into the hay storage. It didn't catch, thanks to the new flame retardant lining I'd installed that spring, but it smoked enough to set off the alarms. When I got there, fire extinguisher in hand, I saw tire tracks in the dirt. Fresh. Wide. Not from a ranch truck. I called the sheriff. Deputy Owens showed up within 20 minutes. Good man. Knew me from town. Had taken riding lessons with his son a year back. He walked the site, flashlight sweeping, face tight. This wasn't random, he said. They knew where to hit. I nodded. I've got cameras. Want to take a look? The footage wasn't crystal clear, but it was good enough. A figure in a hoodie moving quick, ducking shadows, holding what looked like a gas can. Not enough for a face, but plenty for a pattern. Owens took it seriously. Opened an investigation. Marked it as attempted arson. Promised patrols in the area. I appreciated that. But I also knew patrols wouldn't stop this. This wasn't about a code violation anymore. This was personal. Someone wanted me gone. And that someone was getting desperate. I started making calls. Old friends from the army. Quiet people. Trustworthy. Some had farms of their own. Others just missed the feel of a good mission. Within 3 days, I had 3 of them staying on the ranch. We set up shifts. More cameras. Motion sensors. If a squirrel sneezed, we knew it. Then one night, 2:42 a.m., the system lit up. Movement by the north fence. A figure crawling through the brush. Another gas can. This time we were ready. We didn't confront him directly. We recorded. Waited. Watched. As he got near the generator shack, we activated the trap, simple wire snare we used to use for coyotes. Snapped him up by the leg, hard and fast. He screamed. Lights flooded the yard. By the time he hit the ground, we had him on camera, clear as day. It was Gary, HOA's handyman. Karen's muscle. Red-haired, sunburned, and very, very stupid. Sheriff took him in. Found HOA funds in his Venmo. Timeline matched. Motive clear. That's when I knew we had them. Not just for harassment. Not just trespassing. We had them for conspiracy. But even then, I didn't feel triumph. Not really. What I felt was this. These people, these paper pushers in khakis, had turned peace into a battlefield. They'd taken a man's quiet life and turned it into a siege. And for what? Uniform lawn colors? Matching fences? A false sense of control? They wanted obedience. They got resistance. And I wasn't even close to done. They thought it would end with Gary in handcuffs. Thought once their handyman was hauled off in the back of a sheriff's cruiser, I'd drop the matter. That I'd be satisfied with a citation, maybe an apology, maybe a little silence. They were wrong. Men like us, we don't let threats slip by just because the weather calms for a minute. We know better. You spend 20 years navigating insurgencies in the dirt and dust. You learn that silence can be just another kind of ambush. And when it's your land under siege, your barn almost turned to ash, your name dragged through meetings behind closed doors, you don't wait for justice. You make it walk. I took the next morning slow. Coffee stronger than usual. Brutus rested under the porch bench, watching the horizon with the same tension I felt in my chest. The air felt heavy, like the sky itself was holding its breath. I wasn't angry anymore. I was resolved. There's a difference. Anger's hot and fast and burns out. Resolve is cold and steady. It builds. And it acts. First thing I did was drive down to my lawyer's office. Evelyn Grant, ex-JAG, sharp as a blade and just as unforgiving when cornered. I walked in, dropped the new footage on her desk without saying a word. She didn't look surprised. She just leaned back, watched the screen, and took notes with that tight-lipped focus you only ever see on people who've been burned one too many times. When it was over, she looked at me. We have them now. We don't just scare them, we bury them. We filed the paperwork the same day. Civil suit, criminal referrals, a formal motion to subpoena the HOA financials, all backed with photographs, transaction records, and sworn testimony from Greg Walker, the quiet veteran neighbor who, until recently, had said very little, but apparently had seen and heard more than anyone knew. Turns out Greg used to be a city surveyor. The clubhouse the HOA loved so much? Built without a proper easement. Their permits? Based on assumptions, not facts. And worse, Greg had emails. Forwarded to him by accident. Buried in HOA threads. One of them came from Karen herself. The subject line read, "Removing the obstacle." The message? Short, cold, and dangerous. If Dalton won't sell, we'll need to encourage him to move on. Gary knows people. That's not a complaint. That's a threat. And now it was evidence. I sat on my porch that night staring out into the darkness beyond the tree line, thinking how far this thing had gone. What started with a woman whining about barn paint had grown into criminal conspiracy. Fire. Sabotage. Bribery. I should have been shocked. I wasn't. I've seen what people become when power's on the table. When they believe they're above consequence. But what stuck with me more than the threat, more than the emails, was the fear I saw in my neighbors' eyes. Not of me, of their own HOA. Men and women who just wanted to mow their lawns and raise their kids, suddenly waking up to find they'd voted in a regime, not a committee. That fear, it matters. 2 nights later, I found a note pinned to my front gate. No envelope. No signature. Just a single photo of my ranch, taken from inside the HOA clubhouse. On the back, scrawled in thick red marker, were 5 words. You should have stayed quiet. I didn't flinch. I didn't pace. I went back inside, locked every gate, turned on every camera, and called in more favors. I knew what was coming. Desperation doesn't retreat. It escalates. And I wasn't going to wait. I turned over the note to Owens, who had already escalated the case to the County Special Crimes Unit. They brought in fire investigators, digital forensics teams, and subpoenaed email servers. Meanwhile, Evelyn and I launched a parallel campaign. We went public. We filmed a full testimony, backed with documents, timelines, and Greg's eyewitness account. We gave it to a local independent journalist, Savannah, Greg's niece, who ran a YouTube channel with just enough following to guarantee attention, and just small enough to fly under mainstream radar. The video dropped on a Friday. By Saturday morning, it had 600,000 views. By Sunday evening, it hit 1.3 million. By Monday, Karen's face was on the local news, framed beside security cam footage of Gary crawling toward my generator shack with a gas can. Community members began showing up at my gate, not to harass, not to argue, but to apologize, to offer support, to ask what the hell had happened behind their HOA walls. One woman brought me a pie. A man offered to fix my fence. Even Karen's husband, the quiet dentist who rarely spoke, showed up one afternoon with his hands in his pockets and his eyes low. "I didn't know," he said. "She told me you were dangerous." I didn't know. But peace wasn't coming yet. The same night the video hit 2 million views, the HOA building caught fire. I was asleep when it started. Thunder shook the valley. Rain hammered the roof. At first I thought it was lightning. Natural. Unfortunate. But when the firefighters arrived, they found signs of forced entry. The power box had been manually cut. Accelerant had been poured inside, 3 separate points. The flames roared through the walls like they had a purpose. By the time it was out, nothing remained but wet ash and charred brick. Karen showed up at the scene like a ghost. Hair undone. Jacket soaked. Her eyes darted straight to me, as if the fire had burned her certainty along with the ceiling. Then she pointed. "He did this," she shouted. "He's been threatening us for weeks." I didn't move. Didn't even blink. Owen stepped between us firm. "No one's accusing anyone until we have evidence." But the damage was done. Even though the cameras at my ranch confirmed I never left the house that night, even though the rain had flooded every trail around the property, people were rattled. HOA board members began turning on each other. One resigned. Another disappeared. And the rumors exploded. Some said I did it. Others whispered Karen torched it herself for sympathy. But what really turned the tide was the letter from their insurance provider. The HOA tried to claim damages. Insurance denied them. Why? Because the building sat on land they didn't own. Mine. That one fact flipped the narrative like a switch. Overnight, I went from accused to vindicated. Suddenly, people wanted answers, real ones. They wanted resignations. They wanted audits. They wanted to know how the hell a non-profit board ended up plotting arson and intimidation like some back alley gang. But Karen? She vanished. Packed her bags. Left town. Didn't stop her, though. A week later, her lawyer filed a counterclaim, defamation. Emotional distress. Said I'd launched a smear campaign. Said I'd caused her irreparable harm. Evelyn laughed out loud reading it, but I didn't. Because I knew what it meant. It meant she was trying to rewrite the story before trial. Turn herself from aggressor to victim. And that's exactly what these types do when the walls start closing in. They scream. So we doubled down. We prepared our countersuit, pulled more records, dug deeper. Greg turned over a final batch of emails, leaked threads showing direct instructions from Karen to intimidate, threaten, and if needed, destroy Dalton's ability to remain. Their words, not mine. That night, I sat on my porch again. Storm clouds gone. The ranch quiet. The land peaceful once more, but humming with the weight of everything ahead. Karen could sue. She could shout. But the truth had a way of surviving every fire, every lie, every desperate final move. And I was done hiding behind silence. Now it was my turn to speak. I didn't start the war, but I was sure as hell going to finish it. By the time Karen's lawyer filed that laughable counterclaim, defamation, emotional distress, character assassination, I had already moved past anger. What I felt then was something colder. A kind of sharp-edged duty that settles into a man's chest when the line's been crossed too many times. You don't reason with snakes. You cut the head off clean and make sure it doesn't grow back. Evelyn and I met at the courthouse the following morning, both of us dressed like we were going to Sunday service but ready to pull teeth if needed. The clerk recognized us. That wasn't a good sign, but it was a true one. We filed our counter motion, backed with security footage, witness affidavits, property deeds, email threads, and more hard evidence than any court should ever need. Evelyn leaned in close to the clerk and whispered, "Make sure this lands on a real judge's desk. Not someone who plays golf with HOA board members." The clerk didn't blink. "You got it, ma'am." While the court moved in its usual glacial pace, something else was happening. The town had started to change. At first, it was subtle. People stopped looking at me like I was the neighborhood boogeyman. Kids waved again when they biked past the ranch. A man from 3 streets over brought his son to meet Brutus, Said his boy was doing a school report on veterans and wanted to ask about Army life. I told him some stories, left out the darker parts, and showed him how to saddle a horse. For the first time in months, it felt like my land was a home again, not a battleground. But the shift wasn't just emotional. It was political. 3 HOA board members resigned in one afternoon. No press, no speeches, just gone. Greg said they'd seen the writing on the wall, or maybe they'd finally read the emails we'd been mailing out. One of them had apparently called the sheriff's office to provide a full statement and turned over their HOA login credentials. That's when we uncovered the fund, the slush account Karen had used for off-the-book projects. Like paying Gary to sabotage my ranch. Like hiring that private security firm that had quietly backed out once the heat got real. The sheriff's department issued a formal arrest warrant for Karen Whitmore that Thursday. Problem was, Karen was nowhere to be found. Disappeared. Vanished. No goodbye. No statement. She didn't even leave town through the front door. Turns out she'd been holed up in a motel 2 counties over under a different name, hiding out like a politician caught on a hot mic. When they finally tracked her down, she didn't resist. She walked out in a velvet tracksuit and $1,000 sunglasses like she still ran the show. But she didn't. Not anymore. The mugshot hit local news that night. Karen Whitmore, the once feared HOA president, being led into county lockup by 2 deputies with grim faces and matching handcuffs. The photo exploded across social media. Hidden Pines residents posted it with captions like "Queen dethroned" and "So much for community values." One neighbor told me the HOA group chat turned into a war zone overnight. Some still defended her. Most didn't. But just when I thought the story was winding down, I got a call from Evelyn. Her voice was tight, like she'd just bit into something sour. "Mark, you need to come down here," she said. "We got a delivery, anonymous. It's a thick packet. You need to see it for yourself." I drove in without finishing my coffee. The packet was on her desk, unmarked. Inside were photocopies of new emails we hadn't seen yet. Ones not included in our first round of evidence. These weren't just about me. They were bigger. They showed Karen was coordinating with 2 developers. That HOA power wasn't just about lawns and fences. It was about leverage, zoning changes, construction permits, favoritism. She was trading community influence for favors. And I wasn't just an enemy. I was a threat to the whole game. Buried in those pages was a memo labeled "Future Development Risk, Dalton Property." It outlined a strategy for devaluing my ranch, restricting access points, undermining utility connections, even falsifying noise complaints to attract county code enforcement. That's when I realized they'd been playing a long game. Every visit, every fine, every clipboard threat, it wasn't just harassment. It was strategic attrition. They wanted to exhaust me, drag me into so much red tape that I'd sell out and move on. But they underestimated one thing. I'm not a man who breaks. I don't bend when pushed. I hold. And when you come for my land, when you try to carve up the place I bled to earn, you better be ready for what comes next. We sent the documents to the state attorney's office that same afternoon. Evelyn burned through the phone lines like a wildfire, calling every regulator, investigator, and county watchdog she'd ever worked with. Within 48 hours, Karen's HOA empire was under full review. By the end of the week, the Hidden Pines HOA was suspended pending a complete forensic audit. Their office was gone, their authority dissolved, and the land beneath them? Still mine. I didn't stop there. I could have watched them fall apart, let the lawsuits play out, collected the judgments, and rebuilt my fences in peace. But that wasn't enough. I knew I had a chance, one shot, to turn this nightmare into something better. So I called a meeting, open to all Hidden Pines residents. Over 100 showed up, some curious, some cautious, most tired of the drama. I stood in front of them, not with a list of demands or a speech, but with a story. I told them everything, from the first fake notice to the gas can behind the barn. I showed them the maps, the deeds, the court filings, and then I said one thing that shifted the air in the room. I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here to build something better. Then I announced it. I was donating the land under the old HOA building to a local veterans nonprofit. They'd build a community center. Not a place for fines and rules, but a space for cookouts, kids' programs, workshops, and real connection. And yes, the Hidden Pines HOA could use it, if they followed the same rules as everyone else. The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was steady, honest. A few people cried. Greg gave me a nod from the back of the room. Lisa brought cupcakes. Even Karen's husband, quiet as always, showed up and shook my hand without a word. He just said, "Thank you." I walked out of that meeting not as a villain, not even as a hero, but as something harder to find these days, someone who stood his ground and didn't lose his soul doing it. That night, the porch light flickered softly. The cameras were still up, but the tension was gone. Brutus lay at my feet, snoring gently. The ranch breathed like the earth had exhaled, and I finally slept. But deep down I knew. The story wasn't over. Not yet, because evil doesn't go quietly. It lingers, waits, and sometimes it comes back for one last shot. I just didn't know how soon that final chapter would begin. The thing about storms is they don't always leave quietly. Sometimes, just when you think the clouds have cleared and the air feels light again, something stirs in the distance. A pressure drop, a faint rumble, the sense that the earth's not done with you yet. That's what it felt like those days after the town meeting. The Veterans Center plans were moving ahead. The HOA board was dissolved, its authority stripped, its reputation gutted from the inside out. Neighbors waved. Kids rode bikes past the ranch again without fear. The fear in the community had lifted. I should have been at peace. But peace didn't settle in me the way it used to. I was waiting for the other boot to drop. It came one quiet Tuesday evening, just after sunset. I'd just finished checking the new barn locks, upgraded steel, state-of-the-art cams synced to a secure server in Phoenix. Brutus was lying near the porch steps, ears twitching, nose in the breeze. The sky was cooling off, washed in that dusky purple that always reminded me of Kabul, right before night patrols. Then the alerts went dead. All at once. The phone went silent. No pings. No movement detection. No camera feeds. That's never happened before. Not even during monsoon season. I stood up, flashlight in hand, and scanned the yard. The ranch was still. Too still. And that's when I saw it. A black SUV, parked just outside the northern fence. Engine running. No headlights. Tinted windows. It didn't belong to anyone local. I moved slowly. Boots crunching the dirt, flashlight low, phone camera set to record. I kept one hand near the grip of the Colt .45 I hadn't had to use in decades, but still knew like my own breath. The driver's side door opened with a slow creak. And out stepped Karen. Hair pulled back, jacket wrinkled, eyes sunken but burning with something darker than rage. She looked like someone who'd lost everything except her grudge. "You think this is over," she said, her voice thin and dry. "It's not over." I didn't answer. Just stared at her, flashlight steady on the ground between us. "You embarrassed me," she hissed. "You made me look like a criminal in front of my neighbors. My husband. My kids. You made yourself look like that," I said. "I just turned the lights on." She took a step closer. "They believed you because you wore a uniform. Because you have that dog and those damn horses, and everyone thinks that makes you some kind of cowboy messiah. But you're just a man with a chip on his shoulder and too much land." I let the silence sit between us like a drawn blade. "You're trespassing, Karen. Again. This is my land. And you're not supposed to be anywhere near it. You know what happens next." She laughed, short, bitter, and hollow. "I know the law. I know the judges. You think you've won, but you don't understand how power works." I tilted my head. "No, Karen. You don't understand how truth works." She froze, breath catching just slightly, like that hit deeper than she expected. "Get in your SUV," I said. "Go back to wherever you're hiding out. Stay gone. This is your last grace." She stared at me for a long second, then turned, climbed back into the vehicle, and peeled off without another word. That should have been the end. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. 2 weeks later, the trial began. Not civil. Criminal. The state had charged Karen with conspiracy to commit arson, criminal harassment, and destruction of private property. The courthouse was packed. Reporters. Neighbors. Even people from surrounding towns who'd watched the viral video wanted a seat. I sat on the witness bench in a clean flannel shirt and polished boots. Brutus waited outside with Greg. Evelyn sat beside me like a war general with sharpened legal knives. The prosecution didn't waste time. They laid out the timeline with surgical precision. Security footage of Gary sneaking onto my property. Karen's own emails, printed in black and white, with headers intact and timestamps matched. Financial records showing HOA money funneled into unapproved expenses. Threatening notes, the failed development memo, and the cherry on top, a video clip of Karen on my porch that night, caught by a secondary backup camera she didn't know existed. Her defense tried everything. claimed the emails were taken out of context, claimed Gary acted alone, claimed the entire HOA board had acted in good faith. But the jury wasn't buying it. Not when they saw the flare casing. Not when they saw the insurance rejection letter, proving the clubhouse had no legal claim to exist. Not when the arson team testified that the fire wasn't lightning, it was deliberate. And then came my turn to speak. I told my story simply. Not with drama. Not with tears. I told them about the first notice, the expanding boundaries, the threats in my mailbox, the cut power lines, the night Brutus barked and saved the barn. I told them what it feels like when the place you've built to escape war becomes a war zone itself. When neighbors you tried to help turn into predators. I didn't call Karen names. I didn't need to. I just told the truth. And when I finished, the courtroom was still as a tomb. Karen didn't look up once. 3 days later, the jury came back with a verdict. Guilty on all counts. The judge handed down 6 months of county jail, for years of probation, full restitution, and a permanent ban from any future HOA board in the state of Arizona. Some folks said it was light. Others said it was enough. For me, it wasn't about the sentence. It was about the truth standing on its own 2 feet, unbent. The Hidden Pines HOA was dissolved officially within a week, replaced by a volunteer-led community committee. Their first act, approving plans for the Veterans Community Center, now fully funded and under construction. I was invited to the ribbon cutting. I stood off to the side. Didn't want the mic. Just wanted to see kids running, seniors gathering, the sound of life taking root again where fear once bloomed. One by one, neighbors came up. Some shook my hand. Some just nodded. Greg was named treasurer. Lisa ran the bake sale. Even Karen's husband showed up. Said nothing, just left a sealed envelope on the table next to the punch. Inside was a single sentence. I'm sorry for what she became. I keep that letter in the same fireproof safe as the original deed, along with the flare casing, the security drive, and a photo, a picture of my ranch, taken from inside the old HOA clubhouse. On the back of that photo, in red ink still slightly smudged from rain, are the words, "You should have stayed quiet." I never erased them. I didn't have to. They remind me that power isn't found in volume or titles. It's found in roots, in standing your ground, even when the wind tries to rip it out from under you. These days, the cameras are still up, but they don't catch much. Just deer. The occasional fox. Brutus has slowed down some, but his eyes still scan the tree line every dusk like he's expecting something. Maybe he remembers. Or maybe he just likes the ritual. Me? I spend more time in the garden, teaching a few local boys how to saddle up, fixing tools, building things that'll last. The land is quiet again. The war is over. But I'm still standing watch. Not out of fear, but out of promise. Because peace is worth defending. And sometimes, the only way to keep it is to make damn sure no one ever tries to take it again.